Okay, welcome back to another episode of Creating Space. I'm Jeanette.
And I'm Steve.
And we are very excited to be talking to you again today. Today, we're going to be talking about something that we love, we do at Space Creators. It's one of our 4 core services that we offer. We're going to get into email marketing. But before we do, Steve, I want to know, what's something cool that you've learned lately that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we're talking about email marketing today. It is something that our team really loves. Before I get into what I liked, I just want to explain why we love it so much. It really is something that you can show your clients direct ROI. You can very easily connect the dots from the emails that you send to revenue. And so something that I saw that I loved and I shared it with our team was this very strategic email that was sent out by a brand. We didn't do this. It was just an example I saw where they made it look like it was an email that was sent by accident between the CEO and what would have been probably the marketer on their staff. And essentially it was like, hey, here's the discount code for our internal team of 20% off. Can you please set it on the website so that it works? And then they sent it out to their whole list. So for the subscribers, it kind of was perceived like, hey, this brand just made a big mistake and sent this internal team discount code. Really, the intention of the brand was that they wanted to offer the 20% off. Mm-hmm. But for the subscribers, it created this immediate sense of urgency, often trying to create in marketing, where people were actually jumping on to the website and making purchases using this 20% off code. So, I mean, a little bit gray in terms of potentially the ethics, but it definitely played on some core marketing principles. And I thought it was a pretty creative way about, sending out a marketing email and having the effect that you'd want to have from sending that type of message.
Yeah, that's cool. I've seen something similar to that where it was like a very, very poorly designed email. And basically they were saying how like their design team messed up. They like sent it out and then sent a follow-up being like, our design team messed up, feel bad for us. Like, you should shop with us because we made this mistake. And it honestly did work.
Yeah, it's an interesting creative approach. I mean, this isn't email marketing, but it's making me think of almost maybe you would call it like mistake marketing, because I know we were also looking at that Coors Light campaign where they essentially put up a bunch of advertisements in print and a billboard in Times Square, and they had a typo on refreshment. It read refresherment.
Right.
And so it got a bunch of just free media and attention over the day. And then they essentially had already planned the mistake. And it was like, hey, we have a case of the Mondays, and it was this whole campaign that they rolled out afterwards, but kind of a cool approach, a different way. I like that. Maybe mistake marketing is something that you can think about.
Yeah, well, it's like, all of the times you see that on social posts as well, right? Like, people are actually intentionally putting grammatical errors and spelling errors, and people get so worked up over it and they want to correct people so badly. And meanwhile, it's all being done on purpose for that level of engagement.
Yeah, it can be an interesting way of engagement farming. And I think if you dive even deeper, I know with email, before we jump into our actual teaching segment, I would encourage people to just get past the fear sometimes of what you can feel before you click send on an email. If it's something you're not used to doing, there is a real fear attached to hitting that send button about, hey, maybe there's a mistake in this email. Or sometimes when you're setting up the automations and doing all the technical stuff, it can feel a little bit scary if it's not something you're experienced with. You got to try to push past that fear and hit the send button. Our agency, our team, I've made mistakes in sending it in marketing. I'm sure you have received the email that says, oops, that was embarrassing. The sky isn't falling if you send something and there was a mistake. You always have an opportunity to have another touch point, correct the mistake, potentially flip it into an intentional campaign. So again, you got to hit send on that email and get it out there. And I would encourage you, if it's something new, to just know that the first time you go to hit send, there's going to be a little bit of fear associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing that I want to share today is I've been spending so much time with my friend ChatGPT, and I have really been enjoying just like getting to know how to use AI. And I feel like there's just this key thing that a lot of people haven't quite grasped yet when it comes to using AI, and particularly ChatGPT, which is, I think, what most people are sort of experimenting with, even though there's a lot of different AI platforms that you could be using. To get really good with ChatGPT, you need to get really good at prompting. And so that means you actually already have to have a very clear vision of the output that you're looking for. And so I kind of think of it like in the same way that to get good answers from someone, you need to ask good questions. So if you don't have somewhat of an idea of what you're hoping to actually get out of what you're asking AI for in the first place, then you're going to feel left like you didn't actually get something good. So my kind of key learning as of late is like the better that I am getting at prompting, it is actually starting to get quite absurd what the results are that I'm getting. This is where I'm getting some very real impact on my time, on my effort, and on my energy, and it actually being able to bring my visions to life. So basically, it's kind of like it's a broad thing that I'm sharing, but I just think it's super important that if you want to get really good at using AI, you have to get really good at asking questions with context and being super specific.
Yeah, I think you are the perfect person to be giving that advice. You've been someone who's really, I've seen, adopt AI. And just like you said, I have noticed it's kind of one of those things where asking the right questions is super important to get those right answers. And it's really going to empower where it is right now. It's not like it makes somebody who has no idea about marketing a great marketer, right? Another example I would have is that my friend who's an accountant just used it for a huge portion of his work with his clients to save a ton of time. But he told me they would not have been able to use ChatGPT to do the work that I did. I knew the right prompts. I still had to go and get it information to feed it. That again, if you weren't an accountant, you'd have no idea where to go source that information, what the right numbers were to feed into it. So I would ask you, because I think a lot of people, especially as it pertains to email marketing, might get frustrated if they just jumped in to have it write copy for their emails and have it sound very unnatural or not give them the output that they're looking for. Do you have any quick tips in your experience of how you've been using it to get it to a final result that you feel good about?
I mean, I just treat it very conversationally. Like I'm having a very real conversation with the person who is kind of working on something for me. So I think a lot of people go into it with the expectation that the AI is just going to be smarter than you and have the answers that you're looking for, and it's going to fill in all the blanks. And it needs a lot from you to deliver on what you're looking for. So I think my biggest tip, I guess, is that you have to be willing to go back and forth with it quite a bit to get to that final stage. And so when I input and start with something, I'm starting with clarity, I'm starting with context, and I'm being specific about what I want. I don't get what I want in the first response, ever.
You'd say that's normal, that more times than not, it doesn't nail it the first time.
For sure. There's always something missing, whether it's like a piece of context that I missed, an element that it needed to understand that I didn't give it, or a different way of saying something. And so then we'll go back to it and be, again, very specific with context about what I want changed and what I want that outcome to be. And so just being willing to kind of go back and forth. Again, my context and specificity, I guess, are my biggest things, which I would expect from you giving instructions to a human being as well. It's the same mistake people make giving instructions or asking someone to do something in real life, right? Like we ask for something, we don't give context, we're not specific, and then we're not happy with the result that we get.
Right. So really just the more detail that you can give it, the better expectations you can have from what you're going to get back.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I'm speaking at a very high level. So if we were to get into specific scenarios, I could go into more detail as to how I would work with it. And maybe we'll do another episode on that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Without it becoming what this entire episode is about, I think we might want to consider doing it because, again, I've seen you use it so effectively where I've seen other people just not get to that end result they're looking for. So I love that. And I can definitely relate to going in there, asking it one question or trying to get a specific output and being pretty frustrated with the initial thing that I get. So I like that advice around, continuing that conversation, continuing to work with it until you get to something that you're satisfied with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So from that, let's get into the next segment. It's our marketing breakdown. This is the beef, the
meat on the bone.
Talking about today, and it is all centered around email marketing. And the idea again was brought to us by our team and posing the question to us, is email marketing dead? Right? And last time on our previous episode, we talked about marketing FOMO and how there's so many different things out there available to try. And especially when it comes to marketing and digital marketing, all these different avenues to explore, and email marketing is one of them. And so that's the question that they posed to us to kind of get into today.
Yeah. And as I was alluding to a little bit at the beginning of the podcast here, I think the question even arises just with digital marketing trends and how things change very quickly. Email marketing was very, very prevalent, 5 years ago. And maybe even more than that. And then social media kind of took over and I think lended to a lot of people starting to not feel the same impact from email. I think that coupled with the amount of competition and how flooded our email inboxes get and a lack of creativity and evolving to the amount of competition really lended to people starting to think that it wasn't as impactful. But we can say it's made a huge comeback, and it is for the reasons I was speaking about earlier. I think that you can really draw a much straighter line towards end revenue, your return on investment, when you do email correctly, often more than you can with social media. And the other piece I think that's really tricky with social media that we just saw with all of the mess that was going on with TikTok and the potential ban and it coming back is that we don't have control of those lists, right? We don't have control of our followers. We don't have control of how many people see our message on social media, where email is the complete reverse of that. When you get a subscriber, as long as they don't unsubscribe, you now own that contact in a sense, as well as can literally see in the data if they are opening or not opening the message. And when you send the message, it's at least delivered to every one of those contacts that you send it to and that you own. So the opportunity to reach all of them is there. And you can't say the same about social media.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm definitely of the mind that it is not dead and that it's still incredibly valuable marketing channel. It's something we see in practice every single day with our clients who are doing email marketing for us. I believe that across the board in digital marketing efforts, email still has the highest ROI potential of any digital marketing channel that you can do. And we're seeing that in practice for sure with where our clients are making their money back. And there's a huge ROI in their email efforts over the efforts that they're doing on social media in particular. We're seeing that every day.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what do you specifically want to teach the audience today about email marketing through your experience?
Well, I think one of the most important things that I have seen is the importance of actually using email as a tool to build community and to create relationships with people over just selling. So a big mistake that I do see brands making is that the only time they ever email their audience is when they want to push sales. They have a promotion, it's Black Friday, they want to get people to spend their money. And I've actually seen it in practice year over year that if that's all you do, people start to tune you out you start to get way higher unsubscribe rates and your sales plummet as a result, right? Because you're actually really ignoring this idea that you can build some very good relationships. You can include storytelling. You can make real connections with people and not just selling to them all the time.
I imagine that if all you're doing is selling promotions too, that you could hurt your just average sale in the fact that I know if I'm getting emails, and I get emails from brands that run quite a few promotions, you kind of just wait for the thing to be on sale, right? So, I mean, it can be a great tool to push sales when you need to push a certain product or get inventory out the door, or you just have a sale you want to promote. But I do think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, where if you overdo it, it can kind of go the other way and you just won't get any sales in between.
No, exactly, right? People will just start to be waiting for like, oh, that one big sale, or I know they're going to do it at this time. And so what's the point of buying anything at any other point of the year?
Yeah. It's a question we get a lot, so I want to ask you, do you think you can send too many emails?
It's a really good question. And I think it depends on your brand specifically. I actually listened to a podcast the other day where I believe they were sending 20 emails a week, but they were a very high performing brand that they had built a community where they were expecting to get this many emails. They had that many different things to be talking about. But for a lot of businesses and a lot of brands, especially smaller business, like that would not be relevant. That would overwhelm your audience. And so I do think it's very specific to the business, whether you can send too many. You can definitely send not enough, though.
That's a fair point. I would agree with you. I think that when it comes to the frequency of what you send, or how many times you send to your audience, it kind of comes back to what you said at the beginning. If you are delivering high value content and building community and engagement with your audience, and maybe not always just selling to them, those are the emails you look forward to. I'm sure as you're listening, if you think about your own inbox, like we said, it gets flooded with emails, but I promise you can think of at least one or two that you have signed up for that you love. And every time you see it in your inbox, it's just curated. You're the right audience for that email, and you're actually excited to open it up. And maybe it is one of a product you really love to buy, and you're actually just excited to see their catalog because it's such a thing that you like. Or it is a more kind of newsletter editorial style or knowledge-based one that's giving you things that you actually learn from and can action on. Or maybe a mix of both. Those you don't really get tired of, right? Because it's content that's so curated to you that you're excited for it.
Yeah, which I think lends into something else that I'm thinking about as well, like these brands that are sending that high volume of email, also to realize they're not sending 20 emails to every single person.
Right.
Right. So in line with what you're saying, a huge missed opportunity that people are really ignoring is segmenting your email audience, right? Again, this idea about building community and relationships, it's really getting to know people in your email list through data, through conversations, and personalizing the content to them. And if you're not doing that, you're definitely going to lose people in that process as well.
Right. There's so much gold in the segmenting. And I do think we see a lot of clients when they come in, when they send the emails, they are just blasting it to the full list. I think you can very much just get into expertise on proper segmenting, but are there any just like high level general ones you think that most people should be considering? I know it can be very different if you're an e-commerce brand versus a service-based brand, but maybe, just some high-level segments to think through.
More broadly, and what I would just be doing is when people are going to be opting into your email list, it's asking them what they want from you.
Right.
Right? So instead of trying to get more specific, because it is so, again, industry, brand, all of that specific, asking people at the time of sign up what they are interested in will go a very, very long way. And people will tell you, I just want to hear about your sales and promotions, or I'm actually interested in hearing more about this cool thing you're working on the side, or like, I want to hear about the stories and the brand and the background. Like, you can ask them very specifically, what are you interested in? And they can click off those options. And then those are segments. So, I should only send sales and promotions emails to this person if that's the only item that they selected that they're interested in.
Yeah, I really love that advice of actually engaging your audience upon sign up, just to create some initial segmentations as well as inform yourself generally, I think, about what your audience is interested in.
Yeah, like if you think about it, even for yourself, you're a big sports person and a sports equipment person. Let's say you're opting in to a newsletter for one of your favorite sports brands, and then they give you the options of like, hey, what do you want to hear from us about? And they give you 4 options. You might choose all 4.
That's exactly
right. Because you're a huge fan.
Yep.
And so that then gives the brand permission to basically talk to you about whatever they want. You're probably going to be what's called a high intent user.
Totally.
Right. And if it was me, then I actually only want to know about the sales and promotions because I just want to maybe buy you a gift.
Such a good
at some point.
That's such a good point.
And I just want the discount code so I can get it at a better price, right? And
keep the stories, keep
other stuff, right?
But you're so right, because it's exactly what I said before. If I really love a brand, I want all of it. I want all of, and I would actually open most of those emails if it's one of my favorite brands. I love Titleist Golf. I'm wearing their hat right now. If they send me an email, I'm interested to read it, and they do really great content. It reminds me a little bit, interestingly, of what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. I think some of the principles in social media reign true with email, because what you're saying, it makes me think about, hey, an effective tool on social media is polling, is using different methods and tactics to ask your audience what they actually want to see from you. I think that was one really cool example of how you can do the same thing with email. I think also, if you follow Gary Vee at all, he's very famous for the jab, jab, right hook approach on social media. That's back to what you were speaking about, where, hey, maybe I don't just always ask for the sale. Maybe I throw in a couple of jabs and actually give value or tell stories and make my emails content that people want to actually open and read. Well, then when I ask for the sale, I have a much better chance. And it also reminds me too, I think it's become a big story on social media, and why some people might have thought that email was dead is that everyone has such a short attention span. And, all the content needs to be very short on social media, and that's how you're going to win there. And people don't have time to read an entire email and make space for that. I think what we've really seen over time is that if you love the content, you will watch it. I often say someone will binge Netflix all weekend and watch a whole series that they love. Right? We listen to full podcasts that can be an hour plus if you really love it. So if it's a really good email, it's a very strong email, you'll read the whole thing.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I read through and open up every single email from the people who I actually want to hear from, right? And who are sending personalized, good content that's hyper relevant to me as the user that they know I'm going to want to read, and I'll read the whole thing.
Yeah. And you've even reminded me here too. I think if you are a solopreneur or a newer brand, we are big advocates of beautifully designed emails, and it is something that you would want to, it does help to make people want to open and engage with the email. But just you talking about emails that you love, I can think of many that I have subscribed to from marketers that I respect and educate, or newsletters, and they're honestly not always the most beautifully designed email.
I actually think there's been a big steer away from that. So again, it really does depend, okay? It depends on the type of business. It depends on what you're selling, how that gets presented, right?
Maybe a little bit of the brand world type of work that you spoke about last podcast.
The design is going to be really important, but overarchingly, there's a real shift on engagement with email that is a lot more conversational. Again, we're talking about being personalized. We're understanding our audience. We're building a relationship with them. Someone is going to care way more about that. They're going to care a lot more about feeling seen by you as a business or a brand than what your email actually looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I think something else that our listeners might be interested in that I know you have some experience in because you're the queen of these technical things that scare a lot of people would be some email automations.
Yeah, well, I think that is something that is extremely important that people do need to give a lot of their attention to, not only because it's important for like a customer journey, a marketing journey, but also just for freeing up your own time, not having to constantly think about what am I going to email next? What am I going to email? If it was me, like I understand the idea of having kind of a short welcome series, but then I would be thinking kind of 3 steps ahead of that. So if my welcome series is 3 to 5 emails, I might.
Sorry, quickly.
Yes.
A welcome series being like, what is a welcome series? Just
when someone signs up for your email list and they get entered into your list, they should be going into a welcome series, which is 3 to 5 emails, essentially welcoming that person legitimately into your brand, into your community, into your world. And what gets put into those emails is different depending, again, on what your business is. But we're typically welcoming them, maybe offering them something if we're doing e-commerce, giving them some kind of a welcome discount. And then it's typically introducing your business or brand, giving a bit of the backstory, and then can kind of go from there. But what I'd be thinking about is those initial emails and then having a pause, but then continuing that automation with more emails. And so whether we're thinking about not from a weekly newsletter perspective, but a keeping someone engaged perspective, once someone's gone through that welcome series, what am I going to want them to do next, right? How am I going to want them to engage with my brand next? Am I going to wait a month and then try to kind of re-engage them again with some more flows? I mean, having as much kind of set up in the back end as possible so that we're not always having to think about what's happening in these different flows in our newsletters. I feel like it's very, very important. And again, it's something that we're not giving enough attention to. Having all of our automations preset is incredibly important. And again, this is going to kind of depend on if we are an e-commerce brand. There is going to be a lot more specific automations that you should have set up to increase your conversion rates, things like having an abandoned cart and a browse abandonment set up. If we are more of a personal brand or a figure and we have a newsletter, like I have a personal newsletter, right? And so my automations don't go as deep as an e-commerce brand. Right. But I do think it's really important to have those set up and to be thinking about the long run of what we want someone to be doing in our email list.
Right. And you're definitely more technical with this stuff than I am. But my understanding is that essentially you can have the automation set up that if the person takes a certain action, it triggers this set of automations versus if they don't, it'll send something else.
For sure. I mean, you can start to get incredibly granular with what is happening behind the scenes in your list. And yes, it can definitely depend on an action that someone takes. You can actually start to poll people within your emails and then change their journeys depending on what their answers are. It starts to get really, really involved from there.
Yes. As I said, you are the queen of the email. So it is very cool to see the power of when you put that, these technical pieces in place. And I think back to what we were saying before, just try not to let it intimidate you too much. There's so many resources out there to help you along the way in setting these things up. So maybe just start with a welcome flow, like you mentioned, and build from there.
Totally. Yeah. You don't want to make it too complicated. Again, anywhere where it's going to start to get so complicated that you're intimidated and then you're not going to do it, it's not worth doing. But there are a lot of key considerations. I mean, I also think if you're going to do email, you might as well do it right.
Yeah, love that advice.
I want to know what is something that you'd kind of like to start seeing come out of emails over the next little while. email marketing is changing just like everything else. It's constantly evolving, especially with the rise of AI. So what would be some things that you want to see in email over the next little bit that you think brands should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that you kind of have me thinking about when you were speaking more about the idea of when somebody comes in is having a plan to engage them. I've noticed some brands starting to very intentionally, with their consistent contact, they're actually encouraging people to reply directly to the email. So I think, again, just as you would use social media effectively, I think there's room to do more of that, to do more direct, personalized engagement with your audience and make them feel like, hey, I can actually have a conversation back to this brand that I love, and they're actually going to get this email, consider what I have to say. That is something that I think I would like to see more of, because I've seen it a little bit and I think it's very cool. And it's something I know me as a consumer, whenever I feel like I get to be a part of certain decisions or part of the community, it really ties me to that brand even stronger. And so that'd be an opportunity I'd like to see brands leverage a little bit more. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of seeing where things can get more fun and more interesting. And so from an email perspective, I think what I would want to see is leaning into being more and more interactive. So similar to what you're saying with the reply, but from my perspective, it would be things like embedding videos. I wish way more people would embed videos. Like even in your welcome series, if, that second email or even the first one, whatever you want to do, go nuts, has a personalized message from you as the business owner, as founder, welcoming that person into your community, telling them why you care about them being there. I feel like that goes such a long way. And having your face pop up with video every so often in the emails, I feel like just really pushes and solidifies that relationship building piece that I think is so important in email. And then also just like using more surveys, getting people more involved, like it's exactly what you're saying, but it's just getting that interaction from people, like providing them the opportunity to do so. So yes, click reply for sure, but add surveys, add polls. Even if you are like a brand who's going to give a deal or something, like spin to win, like there are ways to embed cool gamification into your emails that I love. Having clickable quizzes is amazing. Like I'm definitely going to take your quiz if you want me to find out which Kardashian I am. Like put in something very relevant to me as the user that I really want to know and find out and like keep me engaged, and then use that data to do something amazing with your automation following from there.
Well, I love that so much. And I think just in marketing in general, the reason those quizzes are so tempting, we all have an ego. And I don't mean it in a negative way. It's something that you can use as your brand to bring that individual in. So I really love those ideas. I love the quiz idea, and actually leveraging email as a source to put that out to your audience is a really good idea.
Yeah, because imagine this. So like, yes, I'm kind of joking, kind of not, because I don't care. I like the Kardashians. Oops. So if your quiz is for me to find out which Kardashian I am, and then I get a result, but then you start to send me emails that are like, let's say I'm Kylie, I get Kylie Jenner, and woo, and then you start sending me kind of personalized emails that like the Kylies of the world would love these things, or the Kim Kardashians of the world would actually go in this separate flow. Like these are another way that you can segment people and then start to hyper personalize them. You answered this, so you need to know about this next thing.
Yeah, that's very cool. I really like that. And it can tell you a lot about your audience and the individuals. And that's a cool way of thinking about segmenting it. I don't know why, but I also thought of, as you were chatting there, and this can be an automation. And I think even as a user, you often know it's not directly to you, but I do really like when you get a founder's message, right? And it does feel directly to you. And so maybe in some of the automations you were thinking about, I think you could tie in that. And then even, something that we've done and I've seen in emails that I do like is like having your signature digitally printed as a founder and putting in this little, it's just a nice touch of personalization and connection. And again, even though you may know as the reader that it is automated, or maybe you don't, I do like it. I like when I receive those, and it's something I'd like to see more of.
Yeah. And you made me think as you were saying that too, because I know that's something that we do for a lot of our clients. And also advice that I recently just gave to someone else was like, even when you're sending those personalized emails that have nothing to do with sales, still providing an opportunity to make a sale is really important. So even if it's not obvious or overt, like remind people of the sale you have going on. Even if it's like, hey, I'm just checking in and like, I just want to let you know what happened to me this week. But at the bottom, I'm including a little banner that's like, just a reminder, this is still going on. You got to keep reminding people. People are afraid of being too salesy. And we've talked about that a little bit, and that like, no, we don't want to be only selling, but also don't be afraid to remind people that you are selling.
Right. So maybe even if the bulk of the email is editorial or a newsletter or value driven, that there's still a small section that you've saved in that space to sell or remind of a sale.
Or at least somehow get me onto your website.
Right.
Like
maybe a call to action.
It doesn't need to be obvious and overt, but that there's still something that could take me down the path of a sale.
Right.
I think is important.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And just as I was saying there, at least a call to action that's driving to potentially another distribution channel of yours. I think we can make the mistake of thinking because somebody's following me in one place that they automatically went and followed me everywhere I distribute my message. And so I wouldn't miss the chance potentially that if you have your own podcast or you are on particular social channels, that you actually use that email to make sure that you give them the opportunity to quickly link to some of those other pieces that you're marketing.
Yeah. Well, then to just keep them engaged in your brand. Like I would not be sending an email that didn't have the opportunity for me to continue to engage with the person beyond that exact interaction, right? Like you want to take them somewhere or have them do something. It's very similar as to sending traffic to your website. Well, if I send someone to my website and then they just look at it and then they leave, well, I haven't done a very good job, right? The point is to get them on the site, spend time there. So that's why we have all these different places that you can click through to, different blog posts that you can read, different products that you can check out. And I want people to keep going from thing to thing that interests them and spend as much time with me as possible, right? I want to keep them interested. So for me, the same thing applies to an email. Even if I'm just writing you a letter, in some way, I want to keep you in my world, right? And so I want to have you either then going out to my website, to my social, or in some way or another, keeping you engaged.
Yeah, I love it. I'm wondering if it's time for us to do our first mailbag.
Yeah, let's do it. Super excited. We mentioned this in the last episode that we were going to start doing this additional segment called From the Mailbag, where we're going to take your questions. We're going to answer them here on the show. And we love that a bunch of you actually did start sending in questions to us right away. So we're going to go for just one question on every episode, at least see how that feels. And then if we have time and space for more, then we can definitely do that. But for sure, again, if you want to send us questions, you can DM us, email us. Anything goes, we will answer them. So we'd
love to hear from you. Please do reach out.
Yeah. So let's get into the first one. So we got this message in our DMs, and it specifically said, I'd like to know more about strategy for selling in your DMs without sounding so salesy. And then in follow-up, without giving away who the person was, Jeanette successfully sold me on the retreat this way, and I want to know her secrets. So for context for this, I did just recently host a business and wellness retreat with my business bestie, Christina Bartold from the Social Snippet and High Vibe Women. We did it in Collingwood and it was a great success. We had such a wonderful time.
Used to be my business bestie before you stole her.
I stole her. She's mine now. No, we can share. But really interesting to get this question, because the first thing that I would say to this, and this is something that I feel is extremely important if you are going to try to sell someone or even just plain old talk to them in their DMs, is like, mean it, like don't just reach out to anyone and everyone. I did not reach out to everyone that I knew with my offer to come on this retreat. I actually was very intentional and purposeful with the people that I invited. And I didn't just put it out on blast. I didn't send it to every single person who follows me. I took the time to think, who could actually benefit from this, enjoy this, add to the experience? Who would actually really, really like this? And it was a small group of people. And those were the only people that I messaged with this. So I feel like that is my first tip, is like, be intentional and mean it. If you think that something that you have to offer could actually benefit someone, really understand why, right? Understand that person, what it's going to do for them. Why do you actually think it's a good fit? Because the number of DMs that we get every single day that are really salesy, that are not personal, that are not thoughtful, is why this gets a bad rap.
Yeah, I think, sales has been my jam for a long time. And I couldn't agree with what you're saying more, because in today's age, especially with, the growth of AI, with the growth of some of these automations, we are getting just so many sales and DMs that really the opportunity in my mind right now is to try to be human. Mm-hmm. The more human you can be, the more success you're going to have. And then I think the other piece is to try to be selling something that you believe is actually serving the person you're speaking to. It's a lot easier to sell something when you think you can actually help that person. And that's a very different energy in offering that service, that product to somebody, than just it being a numbers game and I'm trying to run the same script so many times and eventually I'm going to get a hit. Don't get me wrong. Some of these automations, as long as you're doing the work to market correctly and it is to the right people, are very cool and they do work. But if it's direct DMing, I don't think anything is going to replace. And in fact, I think the opportunity again is trying to just connect authentically as a human and serve that person.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really important for this, and another consideration, is getting people to give you their intent before you reach out to them. So just talked about Christina. This is something that she does super well. She asks her audience every single thing she's going to sell. Who's interested in this? Who wants more information? She either does a slider, a poll, a question box. What do you want to know? Tell me that you're interested in it. And once you've shown me that intent, well, you've also given me now permission to reach out to you with that information.
Yeah, that I think in this instance you would have done, right? There would have been some intent displayed before that you reached out, or at least, like you said before, it was a very curated group of people that you knew you could serve, that you wanted to reach out to and specifically offer this opportunity to.
Yeah, in this specific instance, for me personally, I had a very small group of people that I wanted to invite and that I thought could benefit from this. So I thought for a long time about that. I thought about why I thought it could benefit them, that it made sense for them, that it would actually be a good fit. But for other things, even just for my free community calls, I put out intent for people, right? Like, show me intent that you want to come to this, and then I'll send you more information about it.
Yeah. So if you don't want it to feel too salesy, have some intention.
Yes.
Whether it is in who you pick and who you're talking to and what you're selling them, or in how you engage beforehand. So you're not just sliding into their DMs cold, asking for a sale.
Yeah.
I think it's the last piece that maybe we haven't spoken about too. And another way to go about it is with social media. you have an opportunity to engage with someone authentically before you send them a DM. In the case that they actually post themselves, I would pay attention to that and actually thoughtfully try to engage with their content before you jump right into the DMs with an ask. That is an opportunity I think is often missed. But I will say, even that, as AI and automations are growing, I'm receiving lots of messages that are like, hey, Steve, I love your marketing and dad content. And I can tell that even that is automated. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think very much authentically giving your opinion, giving your 2 cents on what people are posting and engaging.
I have a lot of red flags around that still, though, because to me, that's still a super cold match. Like, you are not getting me
Right.
off of
The one that's like, hey, I noticed this about your content.
I
love it, but it could be better.
I don't believe you. Like, you don't know anything about me. You don't know anything about my content. My red flags are you don't follow me and you haven't been following me for long enough to understand anything about me. Most of the time, they're not. You're sending me what is very clearly a canned message.
Yeah.
This is the same message that you're sending to everyone, that you're changing 1 or 2 words in. I don't think you should ever be sending the cold DM. Like, that's my personal opinion. You can definitely reach out to someone to genuinely want to form a relationship, right? Like, we've talked a lot throughout this episode in varying instances about personalization, community relationship building. That is super important. Do that long before you ever ask anybody for anything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I just think the cold DMing is the complete inverse of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's just become such a numbers game. And at that point, I have questions about if you do believe in what you're selling can actually help people, or are we just trying to cast the biggest net? And likely, in my mind, that's just going to work on somebody who's a little bit more vulnerable for the sale. And that's not the type of sales I'm interested in. So if you're not trying to come across as salesy, I hope that those are tips that resonate with you and will work when you try them.
Yeah, I love that. Keep on sending us your questions. It's really fun for us to answer something that is meaningful and actually is something that you want to hear about and learn about. So keep sending those in. And thank you so much for that first question from the mailbag. So as we aim to kind of round out our episode today, we want to finish it with our final segment, creating space. Steve, what are you creating space for this week?
Yeah, tomorrow I was invited to an in-person event called Digital Harvest in Halifax, and I'm really excited to be making space for it. Networking is something that I really enjoyed doing, and just getting out in person especially, and meeting people and talking and learning about what they do and just having interesting conversations. And so I'm excited to drive into the city and make a day open to go and have that type of connection. I haven't done it in too long, as we've been very busy kicking off the new year with our business. And so, yeah, again, just looking forward to it. How about you?
That's cool. I just want to say I'm excited for you for that as well, because it is something that I know you really enjoy, and is also an area that you excel in, like in being social in these kind of scenarios. And just making connections and building relationships with people is a super strength of yours. So I'm excited for you to get to go and do that.
Thank you for the compliment. I consider myself an ambivert. I don't want to go before it. I enjoy myself when I'm there, and then I'm ready to be by myself or just with you at the end of it. So tomorrow will be a perfect example of that. So I am looking forward to actually getting there and doing it, and equally looking forward to coming home at the end of it.
Yeah. The thing I'm making space for this week is sleep. I have always loved my sleep, but there's a lot of times where sleep just gets put on the back burner. You stay up late, especially running a business, trying to fit in all the things that you want to do all the time. And so sleep is my big priority right now. And I've been listening to, a lot of podcasts, as I do, and was listening to my favorite, Shetty. I'll probably talk about him a million times on the show. His show On Purpose, he did an episode recently with Brian Johnson, who is essentially trying not to die. And he's trying to be the most measured human that there is out there. And no surprise, honestly, he emphasized how if you could only focus on one area to improve and increase your longevity, it would be to focus on optimizing your sleep. And so that's what I'm focusing on. That's what I'm creating space for, going to bed early. Most of the time, if I allow myself, I just fall asleep at the same time as putting our son to bed, which is pretty early. And it's my best sleeps. If I just let myself stay in bed and go to sleep early, I get up early, I've slept through the night, I feel great. That's what I'm trying to keep doing, and not forcing myself to have to get up and do a bunch of stuff in the late evening or in the nighttime to try to get ahead on the next day.
Yeah. And you've inspired me. It's something I'm also wanting to make more space for. And it does remind me of being back in college, and you'd think cramming late for an exam or something was going to pay off. And I do remember the times that I actually was just like, you know what, I'm not going to learn any more of this. And I just went to bed. I ended up doing so much better just because my brain could function the next day and had that sleep. So now in full on adulthood, I think that lesson is probably even more important, to make that space, to make sure that we don't push through, because our bodies will keep running. It will keep going even on little sleep, and maybe convince ourselves we don't need it. I love that one. It is something to make space for. And like I said, you're inspiring me to do the same. So
sweet. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us again today. We're super excited to be back doing this show, and we can't wait to continue to record our episodes. Don't forget to send us your questions for the mailbag, and let us know what you're thinking of the show so far. We really want your feedback so that we can keep making this more and more tailored to you and the things that you want to hear about in the world of marketing.
yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next one.